Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. In this episode, I share the importance of archiving to ensure historical accuracy for future generations. I also explore why preserving our past is the ultimate act of protecting our future. History is more than a collection of dates and names in a textbook. It's a living narrative shaped by the records we choose to keep, and I've been doing a lot of archiving. So prepare yourself for a solo episode where I go on and rant. But also some recent highlights of my travels to Greece and Turkey. I've been enjoying these conversations and hope you have too. If you have, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others, lots of people. If you want to help support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website on patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now on with the show. Hello, everybody. I've just returned from Greece and Turkey. Well, also Barcelona. But Greece and Turkey, ancient civilizations and history has just been on my mind ever since I got back. While I was there, I am a bit of a, let's say, studious student, right? So when I was in school, I was very much, this is what I need to do. My job right now is to be in school, to get good grades. It was all kind of like a checkbox kind of thing. Whereas I think Oscar maybe had a bit of the same experience, but he was like a huge history buff. He hates it when I say this, but this is not a Miosk episode. It is a Mimi episode and he's not here. So, haha. Anyway, he really loves history and I know he really enjoyed history class. I have to admit, I had a really fantastic world history teacher in high school. Shout out to UHS Cougars. Yeah, I think her name was Mrs. Andrews. And I think there's so much truth to the fact that it's not really about the subject so much as the teacher, because there were a lot of subjects that kind of rang true like that for me. Like I loved Latin because of my teacher. And of course, now I'm really regretting I didn't take Spanish or something that I'm obviously trying to learn right now. Instead, I took Latin. But speaking of history and, ancient civilizations and all of that, it just kind of all comes full circle because I again, didn't really love all these subjects in school or anything, but it was more of, I need to get the grade done. This had to be obtained. It was a hurdle to jump. And obviously, guys, that's a figure of speech because if you know me, you know I don't jump very high, let alone hurdle. But I've been speaking a lot about my travels. Those of you who are on Patreon get to see a lot of the pictures and some like quick short stories about things. Shout out to all of you. I really, really appreciate you. Shameless, plug right here. If you want to support me on Patreon, I promise I will try to be less of a slacker, but I do post there a bit more often. There are some extended blog posts. And so those who are following there or even on social media, you'll see some of our travels. But I've been just kind of sharing how fortunate Oscar and I have been to have seen the world, to have been able to experience these cultures and just kind of get these very frequent reminders on how insignificant we are as humans at this point in time. A lot of people ask us how it's possible that we are able to travel. And I will just say really quick, not this is becoming a travel episode because I actually want to talk about history and things, but I will say Oscar and I prioritized our experiences, and we recognized a long time ago that we didn't want to be 85 trying to climb XYZ mountain or go up the Great Wall or, trek around in pain, because I'll tell you what, even right now at the age I'm at, I'm kind of going, thank goodness I'm doing this now. Or, swim with all the animals in the Galapagos. Like, I don't even know that I could do that tomorrow. I'm really glad I did it when I did. So I do urge everybody to think about like kind of your life's plan. And honestly, the reason we're able to do this is one, we don't have biological children, so we're not responsible for financially putting someone through college or the expense of feeding them. So we get that we're coming from a very, very privileged place. But we pretty much wear Kung Fu clothes every day, and I cook every single meal at home. And so that savings, all of that really goes towards our travel budget. And we look at our travel map and just are so grateful for all the places that we have been. And thinking back to all these different ancient places, now that this is actually our first time in both Greece and Turkey, which was really nice because it was a bit of a different experience. Because as you kind of go around the world and at different ages, you see different things, you're exposed to different things. And this time we had our kids with us, not biological kids, obviously, some of my Kung Fu students that basically I've had since they were kids. And it was really cool to be able to share the experience with them. But being at the Parthenon and, seeing the first Olympic stadium and, oh my God, Ephesus, I don't remember how to say it properly. I think it's Ephesus in Turkey. It's just really paints a picture of thousands of years ago. So off the top of my head, having been to Rome and China and seeing these ancient structures and places, you really get transported in time, especially if you have a licensed guide. So again, this is not intending to be a travel podcast and tips, but I will say there are times that Oscar and I have traveled and then we didn't, maybe couldn't afford to or didn't see the value of spending a couple $100s on a licensed guide. But I will tell you, especially in somewhere like Greece and Turkey, where they are archaeologists or historians of archaeology and history, they make the trip and that tour and that site so much more enriching and enjoyable. Like, you can't really appreciate a bunch of rocks that kind of look like it was a building, or, obviously Ephesus looks like a city, but there are a lot of places that you can walk through and really not get the meaning behind things, especially if you see like a painting at the Vatican, right? It's beautiful. I'm sure you can appreciate art unless you're an art history major, like good for you. But even so, walking around with someone who has not only the expertise, but the passion behind it, you get so much more context and stories and just everything comes to life. So as we were walking through Greece and Turkey, through some of these incredible places, it was kind of like walking back in time. So it just really paints such a vivid picture of thousands and thousands of years ago. And of course, Oscar and I, whenever we travel, this is actually a time for us to practice even more. So we do a lot of Kung Fu and Tai Chi when we have sea days or when we have downtime. It allows us to have practice time to ourselves. Believe it or not, even though I'm a full-time Sifu, owning your own business or being the leader of the Wallam system does not give me as much time as I would like to train on a daily basis. I get my, my daily workout in, but it's not really the same. Like, we were able to spend a few hours one morning just kind of doing forms and application and kind of going down a rabbit hole. So wherever we are, we're still like top of mind Wallam Kung Fu and Tai Chi, whatever we can, kind of bring to the table, whether it's in our own practice or how we can bring philosophies in. So we're experiencing, for example, the Olympic Stadium, and it just, of course, reminds us of martial arts competitions. And many of our students are going to be, competing in the next month or so in one of our tournaments here. And, having competed and everything, it was just incredible to see the very first Olympic stadium ever, right? And seeing the stadium, which is the foot race, it's like a sprint, and that's the very first event. And having learned that an Olympiad, which is the 4-year period, is named after the winner of that event for the 4 years, so I was teasing that this is the Olympiad of Oscar because it was his birthday and we were really obnoxious about it. But in any case, being at these places where all of this, something like that, something like competition in this kind of formal way started was fascinating because today in 2026, we're talking thousands of years later, we're still seeing the traditions and kind of the same format like being upheld. So it's like so much they say is true where it's like, you know what? Not a lot has changed. If you look into history, not a lot has changed. Humans will be humans. Movement is movement. Exercise is exercise. Oscar and I, not to disparage any type of exercise or program, but we always laugh when they say, oh, this is this brand new, animal walk. And we're like, yeah, that's our, monkey walk or duck walk or whatever it is that we call it in Kung Fu. And that's been done for thousands of years. And you can keep going backward to where, the Greeks were running and sprinting, and they have maybe developed new ways of doing things. But in all honesty, like, not a lot has changed. And so to stand there in such deep roots in these ancient civilizations, the remnants of them, whether they're, full columns and a full building and library like at Ephesus, or whether it's just one column and then we're supposed to like kind of see the before and after photos of what the archaeologists have discovered. Like, here's what the temple would have looked like where they would, worship Zeus or whatever. It's just really fascinating to know, like, hey, we're not that special. And I know Oscar's not even here. This is not a Me Ask episode. And somehow I've brought it back to his favorite Fight Club. You are not an individual snowflake speech, but it's true. Like, for us to think that we are these, pioneers of all the things, not to say, modern times we haven't had all these amazing discoveries, because of course we have. But if you just kind of get to the bare root of things, it's fascinating to me to see how, like, not a lot has changed. We saw the world's first toilet on this trip, and that really puts things in perspective because literally it got buried, right? So just like in Pompeii, where the volcanic ash covered, and sadly, people died and things were covered. Well, like Ephesus was amazing because it was a similar concept where things were covered, but it was, no one died, and I don't know for sure, but there wasn't any, bodies covered the way that you see in Pompeii, but the buildings were just like all intact. So you could actually walk through the city and get an idea of the grandeur, the library, the streets, the common places where the Greeks gathered. It was really vivid. So you could actually feel like what it was like. It was kind of like being in, one of those medieval fairs where you walk around and you're in a Renaissance and everything is like in the vein of, or you're in one of those cities, but this was actually like the historical place. So it was really cool to kind of just see how much can get buried in history, because, I was asking Oscar, I was like, hey, how come there's like a toilet, over 3,000 years ago? And then, you go into the Dark Ages, you go into these other times, you go into just how long ago, like this was a toilet also in a home, by the way. It wasn't just like an outhouse. But then like we lose that, and just not that long ago, like, plumbing wasn't really a thing. And so he's just like, yeah, things get covered, things get lost. And it's so, so true. And I was just so amazed by kind of the thoughts of bringing myself back to these moments where, yes, we have evolved, but at the same time, we are always devolving, if that's the word. I don't even know. But when we're talking about here, now, then the past, and how that bridge is actually much shorter than we think. Like we think, oh my God, thousands of years ago. But, when we bring it back to Kung Fu, Oscar and I often talk about the history of Walam. And this is actually what this podcast was supposed to be about. So I'm going to get to it. But at the Kung Fu school, I do the monthly lesson plan. And yes, we actually plan. We don't just fly by the seats of our pants and improvise and decide like, hey, let me call, Baisan, which is like, let's light the incense, let's start the class, and then just decide at that moment what's going to happen. Like we actually have a lesson plan so we can give the students the best possible class experience and learning environment. I believe in preparedness. And if you just have a little bit of intention, the execution is a lot better. So this month, actually, there's like at the end of the class, 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes it's conditioning. Sometimes it's like a form check-in or, an application check-in for our kids, especially. We have something called Time to Shine. And, we let the kids perform for one another and cheer each other on. But this month actually is a history lesson. And no, we don't talk about like ancient Greece, but actually Walam history. And while Kung Fu history goes way back, right? We could say the Shaolin Temple is like one of the first roots of formal, Chinese Kung Fu. That's like maybe 1,500 years ago, right? Around 495. But if we go back to the, say, mythical Yellow Emperor, we can stretch that to the Xia Dynasty. So circa 2000 to 1600 BCE or BC, however you prefer to call it. Debatable by a lot of historians. So for argument's sake, let's say Shang Dynasty, which is 1600 to 1050 BCE. So those are sparks of what we can consider Chinese Kung Fu, because there was a Chinese military. And that was, a huge influence, of Chinese Kung Fu. And if you think about Walam Kung Fu, the math that I did, thinking about my dad, his teacher, and then like that being the kind of the founder of what Walam is today, that's maybe 100 years old-ish, maybe a little more, right? But 100 years is still quite a long time. And if we keep kind of going down that rabbit hole of tracing our lineage back all the way to Shang Dynasty, it can get a little, tiresome and in a bit of a stretch too, because there's so much that was lost between that point and now, like Cultural Revolution, anyone? Anyways, but as I start to do these type of things, I realize that I'm doing something very historical right now, which is cleaning out and preserving Wallem archives. So I've been mastering old footage, VHS tapes, mini DV. So disappointing because at the time when we had mini DV, for those of you who know what I'm talking about, those were the camcorders. We had a little tape, but they were supposedly digital. I was like, oh, this is going to be great because once I have this, I'm never going to have to do anything again. It's preserved forever. Wrong. Now I have to get my camcorder, get it to the computer somehow, and bear with me for a second, for those tech savvy, like the software doesn't always talk to one another. So I had to get an older computer to be able to talk to it and a program that was appropriate and new enough to be able to capture, but at the same time, old enough to be able to work with the computer. It's been a bit of a nightmare, everybody. But in any case, it's really, really tedious and tiresome. And I'm so grateful that when I directed and made the documentary Pui-Chan Kung Fu Pioneer, shameless plug, everyone, puichan.com. If you haven't seen it yet, do it now. I digitized a lot. So a lot of Super 8 footage, a lot of old photos, everything was digitized. But lo and behold, thanks, Dad, I've got bins and bins of footage that has yet to be archived. So now I'm on another new project. So I find myself archiving again, which to me, I'm kind of looking at as like kind of a history tour in Wallem. And it's been very, very eye-opening. But if any of you, please let me know, have ever cleaned a closet or your garage and you're like, I am going to get through this whole closet today, or, this side of the garage is going to be clean. We're going to put things on the shelves. We're going to clear things out. We're going to throw things away. And then like 5 hours have gone by and you realize you haven't gotten anything done because you were looking at photos, or you saw like, hey, look at this teddy bear. This was my, from first grade. I won the book fair and I won this. Like if you start going through and you realize like hours have gone by because you just can't stop going through the nostalgia. Yeah, that's my life right now. So even though I'm trying to like push through and get the archive footage done, it's like, nope, I have to watch this because it's bringing up memories. It's really awesome. And honestly, people, if you're watching Grandmaster Chan do forms from the 70s or 80s or 90s or 2000s or anything, it's really, really hard to not just watch it. And so this is my new project. This is also why, not that I'm trying to make excuses, but I am. My podcasts have been a little bit on the back burner because I'm kind of like in archive mode and have been trying to push through before my VHS player dies. And for those of you who know what a VHS player is, you know that you can't just run it for hours and hours and then, just capture everything at one time. You have to kind of give it a break. You gotta talk to it. You gotta let it go. Hey, it's going to be okay. We're just going to rewind now. And then we're going to give you a break and then we're going to play, and please don't die on me. The first VHS tape player I got to help with the archive ate my tape, and I had to get tech support, and we had to like manually take apart the VHS player to get the film out. And I felt like this is not my jam, guys. Like I barely know the difference between the two types of screwdrivers, Phillips and a flathead, right? I mean, I do, but that's about it. And so this was kind of overwhelming. So it's been a bit of a bear. So I apologize for the lateness in podcasts. Maybe you needed a break though. Maybe. I don't know. But I have been doing this big project, and yes, Oscar's now rolling his eyes at me because he always says I can't help myself. I take on all these projects, and whether it's making a documentary, building a museum, if you've ever been to the Wallem Cultural Center, I curated that. And also basically after the building was done, I, basically had a lot of wonderful humans who helped put everything up on the walls, but I had to kind of design and build that out. And that took quite a lot, whether it's, taking care of the family, running Wallem, passing legislature for anti-Asian hate and education. Like, yes, I also try to be a really good wife. And I said earlier, I cook 3 meals a day, right? So if you follow me, at least you know and see that there's evidence that I have been doing that. And so I'm doing my best, but I do take on a lot of projects, and this podcast, of course, being one of them. But thanks to my patrons, you guys like really help keep this going. So again, thank you. Another tangent before I jump back into history is that now I realize, after saying all of these things in this solo ep, that is why I've also been sidetracked with face products and new creams and lotions, and my hair's been falling out, and I'm like, hey, maybe I should just collect all this hair for the wig I'm eventually going to need, because I feel like, how is it even possible I have hair? And for my long-haired humans, a little bit of a rant here, a quick tangent rant. Why is it only the black hair falls out? Like, why is it not all the gray and white hairs that fall out, leaving me only with my natural black hair? If anyone can answer that, please let me know. But in any case, back to archiving. One of the cool things I've been seeing is like old China trip footage, and seeing my father actually from, the 80s, especially, doing Kung Fu and Tai Chi training with his peers. So some of the other grandmasters of several different styles, and just kind of remembering stories as a young child. One is, it was always awesome when these masters would come to visit, because that meant I was definitely getting a cool gift from China that at that time, guys, there wasn't an Amazon or an Alibaba or whatever it is. Nope. What's the one that everybody, Temu or whatever, all these places where people are ordering stuff. You couldn't just get your Korean face products from Yes Style or anything like that. Like, you actually had to have someone come with the products. So I always got really cool things. So when a China master was coming, my excitement as a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old was that I was going to get a really cool gift. But now, as I look back and see those videotapes and think about the footage and think about the art forms that have been preserved because of his relationships, it's kind of remarkable. A lot of these grandmasters have passed away, and it's really nostalgic to see them, see my father training with them, my mom, hearing their voices, which, as you know, your voice changes as you get older. So it's just been really incredible to kind of witness that again, but through the eyes of an adult, and through the eyes of an adult that has now made Wallam their life, and has also pledged to kind of keep that legacy and proliferate the style and preserve it. So it's really cool to kind of watch them and think like, I remember I was playing in the yard when they were training in the front driveway, which, by the way, think about like being in 1984 and neighbors driving by seeing people with swords out in their driveway. Like, now it's not as strange. Okay. Like my bestie, Dr. Mark Cheng, when we go to visit him, we'll pull up into his cul-de-sac and there he is with the bullwhip or with a kwando or something. That's actually not that strange. That kind of tracks. But in 1984, it had to be kind of weird. Like, oh, there's those Chinese people with their swords or whatever. So I wonder why I didn't have too many neighborhood friends. Now that I'm talking about it, I kind of guess. But anyway, we have over 160 plus forms and weapon sets in Wallam. Yes, you heard that right. And I think about, why did my dad decide he needed to continue like bringing grandmasters here, not just for him to learn from them, but for students to learn? Now, from the Tai Chi side, I kind of get it, because he was just so humble. He got the fact that he had a limited amount of Tai Chi knowledge. There was a lot of standardized sets, 24, 42, etc., from China. And he was like, hey, I want to learn them from the best. He had a lot of other, Chen style, Bakwa style, other masters come over and to teach. And that's why my mom is a Tai Chi master now, because she started training so many years ago, over 40 plus years ago, from the best. We went to the Chen village, right? Like, we've been there, and that's where like a lot of those roots come from. So it's been fascinating to kind of go back through this historical timeline and kind of see what was happening at the time now as, me, adult Mimi. And it's kind of boggling, because a lot of grandmasters aren't that way. They won't bring over different masters to teach and open that up to, their students to learn, for example. And, my mom, I remember actually asking like, well, why would you want these masters to come over here? Aren't you afraid like someone's going to prefer a style, or they'll leave you for the master if the master is now like teaching in the US or something? Or he has sponsored masters to come over here. He has sponsored, help people, written letters, done so many things because he is so generous and so open. He's helped so many people have opportunity to come to the United States or even Canada and just kind of be over here by exposing them to a different market, especially when there was a lot of turmoil in China and Hong Kong. So, one of the things he said was, if a student wants to go, then they need to go. They were never my student to begin with. And I never forget him saying this. Even as a very young child, I would hear that because every year there would be different masters that would come in. And he was so dedicated to teaching and sharing Chinese martial arts, not just Wallon, but like all Chinese martial arts from legitimate masters. People like Grandmaster Zhang Bingdao, who's passed away now and was just like an incredible praying mantis master. And also taught my dad a lot regarding the history and shared books and different, knowledge with him about that type of lineage. Because, of course, my father, we lost Li Kuanshan very early. There wasn't a lot of information that we could have gotten. So he also found it as a way to bridge the gap. And he was so open and generous and confident in himself and who he was as a Kung Fu master that, he never felt threatened, even though many of these masters turned out to be really not nice humans. Now, Zhang Bingdao was lovely. That's not who I'm talking about. There have been others that have come here or, found their way, or got a sponsor, or he sponsored them. And, there have been some that have really done him wrong, taken him for granted, definitely like sidelined, try to take students, things like that. And he still would always do the same thing. So it's like, not that he didn't learn his lesson, but I think he just didn't let it jade him. And that in itself has been a really incredible lesson to watch, because it's not really in my nature. Like if I've been done wrong, I'm kind of like, okay, I learned from that. I'm done. I'm not going to be a doormat. But at the same time, you have to kind of remember like every circumstance, every person is their own person, is its own circumstance, and just trying to kind of be open to that. So I'm trying to learn as I've been archiving. It's not just digitizing and going, oh, I want to make sure this form is preserved, or watch this video of, this part of the China trip, or, the Shaolin Temple in the 80s where people didn't know what it even looked like back then, because of course it looks like Disney World now, but it was broken down, right? And there was just like ruins almost. And so just kind of seeing all the history, yes, but also taking the time to do the garage clean out and be nostalgic about it isn't such a bad thing, because I'm learning history and remembering it along the way. So like watching 30 seconds of video footage is bringing up philosophies that have stayed with me for over 40 years and means something different to me now. And I think it's just really kind of remarkable, because he's so prolific. My dad has been so impacting on so many people. But when you're his daughter and you're 8 years old, you don't see him that way. And that's why it took me so long to kind of come around to wanting to do this as my life and really taking it seriously, because, I didn't see him the same way everyone else saw him. And now I see him through those eyes as well as my own as his daughter. And so it's really been emotional and nostalgic to kind of watch all these videos, but it's also been really inspiring. And just to kind of watch and see how my students, who I've allowed some of my kids to come in and watch some of the videos to kind of inspire them, but then to see them take that to the classroom and, lower their stance or do a couple extra Tom Tuis in the same vein and flavor and flair as Grandmaster Chan has been really exciting. And I think this is exactly what it's about. So it's like preserving the history and then allowing people to see the history and to be inspired by the history and to remember where we come from and to know like, hey, we can always be improving and do better. And that the past isn't just in the past, it's also our future. And I think that even though it's been a bit of a vortex, I think it's just been a really, really amazing and incredible opportunity. In the same way I get to travel and go and stand in ancient cities and think about those that have come before us and the contributions to what modern times we have the Olympics or we have modern plumbing or whatever it is that we have from our history. I think, yes, we have to know it, but I think the recall, the reminder, and then the implementation of the lessons is just a whole nother level of the takeaway of how we can continue to better ourselves. And so I'm maybe also just telling myself this so I feel better about the crazy archive project that's been so tedious. But I will say, history is everywhere if we're paying attention and if we take the time to honor it. And I'm so grateful that I have this library of history and to be able to podcast about this so I don't get grumpy about it, but also so that things are not lost forever. And, I mentioned earlier, like the Cultural Revolution, like it breaks my heart to think about the lost artifacts and books and pieces of history that we could have learned from. So much that we could have learned from. And so my hope is that by doing this archival project, by preserving history, by preserving Walam, by keeping all of that going, that we don't become this, civilization or this little piece of, Chinese martial art history that just gets covered in ash and then gets discovered again one day. I hope that with this digitization, real digitization, not mini DV, everybody, because that's still tape and you still need like a mechanical source. I hope that because they're on hard drives and these are digital files, it really will be easier to archive. And these are the contributions that, definitely is like the old bookkeepers back in the day that would write down, and you just had these scribes that their job was to sit there and just record history. God, can you imagine the carpal tunnel they must have had? But I think that in this phase of my life, or at least for this year, I see myself as one of those, old bookkeepers, old scribes that are just like there trying to record it, trying to keep it going. And I hope that we are able to, have a mark. And wow, what would it be like to be a fly on the wall 3,000 years from now? And what will the Walam Temple Archive Library look like? And who will discover it? It's kind of fun to think about. So I wanted to give you an update on what I've been up to. I wanted to share with you a bit about my reflection from my travels and how that kind of comes together with the here and now of what I'm doing and why I continue to put one foot in front of the other, or keep putting record and play and going through all of this and just kind of the daily grind, but also an excuse of why I haven't podcasted. So thank you for your patience on that. And if anybody else has anything to share regarding their history journey or your history journey, or like, what it is you're doing over the summer, I'd love to hear about it. Again, I appreciate you guys for being so patient. From 2017 to last year, I pretty much kept up an impossible pace, and I will be podcasting more one-on-one and, kind of what I talked about earlier with the wrinkles and the hair falling out. My vanity doesn't allow me to just pick up the mic and podcast for camera. That's why this is an audio only. I'm going to be totally honest. I'm like completely in my pajamas right now. So, this is what you may be getting a bit of more of is this audio podcast. And I hope it's okay with you, because it allows me to keep my thoughts kind of succinct, but also remind me why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I really appreciate all of you guys who've been so supportive since day one. You know who you are. I can't believe it's been this long since I've been podcasting, and I'm super grateful. And I do have some guests kind of lined up, meaning we've been reaching out and trying to get schedules in place. So you won't have to just hear me rant. And, there's always the Miosk episodes, but I still have my usual suspects on retainer, so to speak. And hopefully the schedules will align and you won't have to just hear me rant for half an hour. But I appreciate you guys. Please keep subscribing. Please keep sending comments and sharing love for this, because it does help me and reinforces that I'm not just talking into the ether. But I appreciate you guys, and I hope you all are having an absolutely fantastic summer. Bye.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.